The untold story of the Cold War espionage. The old city hummed, a low, nervous rumble under a sky the color of bruised plums. Rain slicked the cobblestone streets, making the gas lamps glow with a blurry, golden halo. This was Berlin in the heart of winter, 1961, a city split right down the middle, where every shadow held a secret and every whisper could cost a life. Our story begins not with generals or presidents, but with a quiet woman named Anya, whose hands, though small, held the weight of a nation's biggest secrets. Anya walked with her head down, her dark coat pulled tight against the biting wind. Her breath puffed out in small white clouds, disappearing almost as soon as it left her lips. She moved like a ghost through the crowded East Berlin market, past stalls filled with wilting vegetables and rough-spun clothes. Her eyes, however, missed nothing. They darted, quick and sharp, taking in every face, every movement, every shift in the air. She was looking for something, or someone, and the fear was a cold knot in her stomach, colder even than the winter air. She was just an ordinary librarian to the outside world, cataloging books in a dusty, quiet room. But by night, Anya was a shadow dancer, a whispered name in dark alleys, a courier of secrets between two worlds locked in a silent war. Tonight, her mission was simple, yet terrifyingly complex. She had to deliver a tiny, rolled-up film canister, no bigger than her thumb, hidden deep inside a hollowed-out book. This film held pictures of brand-new missile sites, hidden deep in the Soviet Union, pictures that could change the entire balance of power. Her contact was supposed to be a baker, a kind-faced man named Klaus, who always wore a flour-dusted apron. He was to give her a loaf of rye bread, warm from the oven, and in return, she would give him a book. A simple exchange, a picture of normal life in a city that was anything but normal. She found his bakery, the warm smell of rising dough a comforting blanket in the chilly air. But something was wrong. The lights were too dim, the window display empty. A shiver ran down her spine. She pushed open the heavy wooden door. A small bell tinkled above her head, but no one came to greet her. The smell of bread was faint, old. The silence was thick, heavy, like wet wool. Anya's heart began to beat a frantic drum against her ribs. She looked around the small, empty shop. Sacks of flour lay overturned, spilling white dust like snow on the wooden floor. A chair was tipped over. It looked like someone had left in a hurry, or had been taken. Her eyes scanned the room, trained to spot the smallest detail out of place. On the counter, half hidden by an empty bread basket, lay a single, small wooden bird. It was painted bright red, with tiny black eyes. Anya felt a jolt. This was their emergency signal. The bird, painted red, meant danger. Get out. Run. Anya's mind raced. Klaus was gone. The message was clear. She clutched the book tighter under her arm. The film was still with her. It was too dangerous to keep. It was too dangerous to lose. She had to get it to the next contact. But who was it? Klaus was her only link. Her mission had just gone from hard to nearly impossible. She backed slowly out of the bakery, her hand reaching for the cold metal of the door handle. Just as her fingers brushed it, a voice boomed from the back room, sharp and cold like cracking ice. Looking for something, Fräulein? Anya froze, every muscle in her body tense. She slowly turned. A tall, burly man stood in the doorway of the back room, his face hard, his eyes like tiny chips of glass. He wore a heavy, dark uniform. Stasi, the secret police. He held a large, rusty wrench in his hand, as if he'd just been fixing something, or breaking it. Just looking for a loaf of bread, Anya said, trying to keep her voice steady, trying to make it sound light and innocent. But her throat felt dry, like sandpaper. The man took a slow step forward. Klaus isn't here today. He had urgent business. His gaze dropped to the book under her arm, then slowly, deliberately, rose back to her face. He smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was a predator's smile. Perhaps you'd like to wait for him? In the back room? Anya knew what happened in the back rooms of Stasi interrogation centers. She knew what urgent business meant for people like Klaus. Her mind screamed run. Her body, however, felt heavy, rooted to the spot by fear. But then, a flicker of courage, like a tiny spark, ignited inside her. She remembered the faces of the people she was protecting, the idea of freedom. No, thank you, she said, her voice surprisingly firm. I have other errands. She turned quickly, flung open the door, and burst out into the rainy street, not waiting for his answer. She heard his shout behind her, angry and loud, followed by the heavy thump of his boots. He was coming. Anya ran. She ran through the narrow, winding streets of East Berlin, past dim apartments and shuttered shops. The rain plastered her hair to her face, stinging her eyes. Her coat flapped behind her like a broken wing. She could hear the man's heavy footsteps getting closer, closer. He was faster than she thought. She darted down an alley, dark and smelling of damp earth and stale garbage. Her foot slipped on a patch of slick mud, and she nearly fell. She caught herself, pushing off a grimy brick wall, her heart hammering. The alley opened into a small, deserted square. A lone, flickering street lamp cast long, dancing shadows. There was nowhere to hide. Then she saw it, an old, rusting dumpster, overflowing with crates and cardboard. It was a risky move, but she had no choice. With a burst of desperate strength, she climbed into it, pulling the lid down just as she heard the man's furious cry as he emerged into the square. She held her breath, surrounded by the stench of decay and the cold dampness. She heard his heavy breathing, his frustrated curses as he stomped around the square, searching. He paused right next to the dumpster. Anya could hear the creak of his leather coat, the soft thump of his heavy boots on the wet ground, just inches from her head. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to become as small, as invisible as possible. The book, still clutched tightly, felt like a lead weight. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, his footsteps slowly receded. Anya waited, listening, counting her breath. When she finally lifted the lid, cautiously, the square was empty. Only the rain continued its soft, drumming rhythm. She climbed out, her clothes smelling awful, but she was free. For now, she was alone, with a vital secret and no way to deliver it. The film was burning a hole in her pocket, a dangerous burden. She needed a new plan, and fast. The Stasi would be looking for her now, everywhere. Her usual safe houses, her usual routes, they were all compromised. She had to think of something completely unexpected. Anya remembered a tiny, forgotten cafe near the train station. A place where old men played chess and drank weak coffee. It was run by an old woman named Frau Schmidt, who seemed to notice nothing and everything all at once. Frau Schmidt had a soft spot for stray cats and, rumor had it, for stray secrets too. It was a long shot, but it was her only shot. She began to walk, trying to blend in, trying to look like just another tired citizen heading home. She pulled her scarf up higher, hiding part of her face. She walked past the bombed-out shells of buildings, grim reminders of an older war, now silent witnesses to a new one. The air grew colder as night fully descended, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and inky black. The cafe was small and steamy, a welcome warmth after the chilling rain. The clinking of cups, the low murmur of voices, and the smell of roasted coffee beans filled the air. Frau Schmidt, a tiny woman with wispy gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, looked up from behind the counter, her eyes surprisingly sharp. She saw Anya. She saw the fear in Anya's eyes, even as Anya tried to hide it. Anya ordered a small cup of coffee, her voice barely a whisper. She sat at a corner table, pretending to read the hollowed-out book. Her hands, hidden under the table, trembled slightly. She took a sip of the bitter coffee, letting the warmth spread through her. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Every person who walked in, every person who glanced her way, sent a fresh wave of panic through her. After a few minutes, Frau Schmidt came to her table, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. She refilled Anya's cup, her movements slow and deliberate. As she leaned in, her voice dropped to a barely audible murmur. "There is a new book at the library, child. An old tale about a brave knight and a lost key. Does that mean anything to you?" Anya's heart leaped. A new book at the library? That was code for a new contact, a new drop point. "Yes, Frau Schmidt," Anya replied, trying to sound calm. "I do enjoy old tales." "Good," the old woman said, giving her a small, knowing smile. "It's waiting for you, in the section on ancient history, under the letter G for Guardians." She straightened up, then moved off to serve another customer, leaving Anya alone with the new, thrilling piece of information. The library. It was a risky place, but it was also Anya's usual hunting ground, her disguise. The Stasi wouldn't expect her to return to the very place where she worked, not after what happened to Klaus. It was bold. It was crazy. It was perfect. She paid for her coffee and left the cafe, feeling a new sense of purpose. The rain had stopped, and the streetlights cast long, yellow paths on the wet pavement. She walked with more confidence now, her steps lighter. The library was only a few blocks away. The main library building was a grand, imposing structure, usually bustling with students and researchers. But at this late hour, it was mostly empty, the only sounds the soft creak of the floorboards and the rustle of turning pages. Anya knew the building like the back of her hand. She knew the secret passages, the dusty corners, the squeaky steps. She walked straight to the ancient history section, her heart thumping a steady rhythm. The shelves were tall and dark, filled with heavy, leather-bound books. She found the G section, her eyes scanning the titles. There it was, a book titled Guardians of the Golden City, an old, thick book with a faded blue cover. She pulled it from the shelf. It felt heavier than it should. Her fingers brushed against a small, loose flap at the spine. She opened it carefully. Inside, not a key, but a tiny, folded piece of paper. Her eyes quickly read the cramped handwriting. It was a new set of instructions, a new rendezvous point, a new contact. The instructions were clear. She was to go to the Bahnhof Zoo train station. A man would be waiting for her at the old clock tower. He would be wearing a red scarf and holding a copy of the Communist Manifesto in German. The exchange was to happen exactly at midnight, and then she was to cross to West Berlin. Tonight, crossing the border was the hardest part. The Berlin Wall, a stark line of concrete and barbed wire, had only gone up a few months ago. It had sliced the city in two, trapping thousands. Guards watched every inch, every shadow. But there were tunnels. There were secret passages. Anya knew about them. She just hadn't expected to use one herself. She quickly put the note back, replacing Guardians of the Golden City on the shelf. She walked out of the library, the hollowed-out book still under her arm, the precious film still hidden inside. The clock was ticking. She had only an hour before midnight. The Bahnhof Zoo station was a maze of echoing halls and deserted platforms at this hour. The few people left seemed to scurry like mice, eager to be home. The air was cold, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and something metallic. The old clock tower stood tall in the center of the main hall, its hands slowly ticking towards midnight. Anya walked towards it, her eyes scanning the sparse crowd. She saw him, a man standing by the base of the clock tower, his back to her. He was tall, dressed in a long, dark trench coat, and around his neck, a vibrant red scarf stood out against the dark fabric. In his hand, held loosely, was a worn copy of Das Kommunistische Manifest. Relief washed over Anya, so powerful it almost made her knees buckle. She was almost there. This was it. She walked slowly, trying to look casual, trying to control the tremor in her hands. As she got closer, the man turned. His face was shadowed by the brim of his hat, but she could see the glint of his spectacles. He looked older than she expected, with a kind, gentle face, almost like a professor. He met her gaze, and gave a small, almost invisible nod. Anya approached him, stopping a few feet away. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft. "Do you know if the bookstore is still open? I am looking for a first edition of Crime and Punishment." This was their code phrase, passed down from Klaus. The man smiled warmly. "Ah, a connoisseur. Regrettably, the bookstore closed an hour ago. But I do happen to have a copy of Crime and Punishment myself, though it is not a first edition. Would you like to see it?" He held out his hand, palm up, ready to receive the book she carried. Anya's heart hammered. She reached into her coat, pulling out the hollowed-out book. Her fingers, however, hesitated for a split second. A tiny, almost imperceptible detail caught her eye. The man's hands. They were clean, too clean. No smudges of ink, no calluses. Not the hands of a professor who spent his days with old books. More like the hands of a soldier. And then she noticed something else. The way his coat hung. It was too stiff. And a faint outline, barely visible, where a pistol might be holstered under his arm. This wasn't her contact. This was a trap. Another Stasi agent. They had caught Klaus, and they were using his contact network to find her. Anya's mind screamed. No, she had been so close to freedom. She knew this trick. The Stasi often sent lookalikes, using stolen code phrases. Her only true contact would have a deeper, more personal code. Klaus's favorite kind of bread, perhaps. Not just a book title. Actually, Anya said, pulling the book back slightly, her voice suddenly stronger. "I've just remembered. I prefer a different edition. A very rare one. Do you happen to have a copy of The Little Prince with a blue ribbon bookmark?" This was her countercode, a detail only Klaus, her true contact, would know. He had given her that book as a gift, with that specific bookmark, years ago. The man's smile faltered. His eyes, behind the spectacles, hardened. The gentle professor mask slipped, revealing a flash of something cold and dangerous. "I'm afraid I don't," he said, his voice now flat, devoid of warmth. "Perhaps you should reconsider, Fräulein. It's late, and you are holding something very important, aren't you?" He took a step closer, his hand subtly moving towards his coat. Anya knew she had only seconds. She had walked right into their trap, but she had also seen it. Her training kicked in. She dropped the book, letting it fall with a loud thud onto the cold floor. The man's eyes, drawn by the sound, flickered down for a fraction of a second. That was all she needed. With a desperate burst of speed, Anya spun around, not towards the exit, but deeper into the station, towards the dark, deserted train tracks. She heard the man shout, a command, and then the sound of other heavy footsteps running towards her. More Stasi. They had been waiting. She ran down a dark stairwell, her feet clattering on the metal steps. The smell of oil and old iron filled her nose. She burst onto a platform empty and cold, lit only by the distant, weak glow of a single bulb. A forgotten, ancient train, covered in dust, sat on a far track, its windows like dark, empty eyes. Anya didn't stop. She jumped down onto the tracks, ignoring the sharp pain as her ankle twisted. The gravel crunched under her thin shoes. She ran between the rails, her mind focused on one thing, escape. She knew the old tunnels, the abandoned service routes. Klaus had told her about them once, laughing about the rats that lived there. Now, she prayed those rats would be her only company. She could hear the shouts getting closer, the pounding of heavy boots on the platform above her. The Stasi were on her trail, relentless. She ducked under a rusted old train car, squeezing through a narrow gap between the wheels and the concrete. The space was tight, dark, and damp. She shuffled forward on her hands and knees, pushing herself deeper into the darkness. The air grew heavy with the smell of mildew and stagnant water. She knew she was heading towards the old sewer lines, a dangerous, disgusting path, but one that led under the wall, under the very heart of the city, to the west. She emerged from under the train and found a small, almost hidden opening in the wall, half covered by vines. It was barely wide enough for her to squeeze through. This was it, the entrance to the forgotten network. She pulled herself through, tearing her coat and scraping her skin. The tunnel was pitch black, silent except for the drip, drip, drip of water and the frantic thumping of her own heart. She pulled out a tiny, waterproof flashlight from her pocket, a tool from her spy kit, and clicked it on. A weak beam of light cut through the inky blackness, revealing a narrow, muddy tunnel stretching endlessly before her. Rats scurried away from the light, their tiny eyes gleaming like red jewels. The air was thick and foul. Anya pushed forward, her injured ankle throbbing with every step. She moved slowly, carefully, her senses on high alert. Every rustle, every distant sound, sent a jolt of fear through her. She knew they would be looking for her, sending search parties into these forgotten depths. She thought about the film, still hidden in her hollowed-out book. She had dropped the book, hadn't she? Her blood ran cold. No, she hadn't dropped the real book. In her panic, she had quickly switched it. She had an identical, innocent book in her other hand, a copy of an old German fairy tale collection. The real book, with the film, was still with her, tucked safely inside her inner coat pocket. A small victory, a tiny spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The tunnel twisted and turned, sometimes opening into larger, cavernous spaces, sometimes narrowing to barely a crawlspace. Anya pushed through, her body aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She imagined the Stasi above, searching, their furious voices echoing through the tunnels, but she heard nothing but the sounds of the deep earth and her own movements. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time lost all meaning in the dark. She thought of Klaus, of his kind smile, his flour-dusted hands. She hoped he was all right, though her heart told her a different story. She thought of her family, safe in the West, people she hadn't seen in years, people she protected with every dangerous step she took. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she saw it, a faint glimmer of light in the distance, a pale, milky glow. Hope surged through her, giving her new strength. West Berlin. She pushed herself harder, ignoring the pain, moving towards the light. The tunnel opened into a small, abandoned cellar, a forgotten part of a building that had been damaged in the war and